Eli Lederman, ESPN.com with us on 365 Sports. Eli with Greg Smoke, Paul Catalina, David Smoke. Eli, thanks for your time. We just had Ralph Rousseau, Associated Press, on. We're going to focus in on Ohio State, Georgia, with those who cover them, including in the recent segment, Dan Hope from 11 Warriors. Anything in particular? It seemed like it. I saw the top 25 image, and I went, okay, and nothing that, jumped out at me. Anything with you?
No, I mean, I feel like this poll, and thank you guys for having me on again. I think the preseason poll is always kind of goes chalk on how we think it is. There's a lot of conventional thinking across the country. I say this as a writer who does not vote in the AP poll, but, you're getting the perspective of a bunch of writers across the country, and we really haven't seen these teams yet. So it's less for me about, surprises today, but, looking around, Ole Miss, I think this is their best, preseason poll ranking since the 70s. I think they're going to be a team to watch this year. Missouri, certainly, kind of one of those hot, picks beyond the SEC elite that people are excited about. Looking throughout the Big 12, obviously got Oklahoma State 17, Utah 12. To me, K-State is kind of that dark horse this year. So I look at this less as, where were the surprises? Even Kansas being 22, I think, speaks to the depth of the Big 12. But more to, where people have these teams and where we think they're going to be by the end of the year.
Eli, is there a team that you think is being slept on within the 25 ranking?
I think, Tennessee is a school that if they pull the things they've got to pull together, and those are some big ones, that, does Nico Imaleva look like, the kid everyone thinks he is? Early on enough, they're going to get that early test with NC State. I can see them, getting into this conversation. I mentioned Kansas State. I'm really high on them this year. I just think there's a lot of opportunity in the Big 12, especially in this expanded playoff, and they'd be someone I'm curious. But at the same time, you put that question around, does Michigan, they're still bringing back plenty of talent, but they lost so much. They've got so much upheaval, all that stuff going on with the NCAA. Do they, say they're ninth right now? Are they going to be a playoff team or even a playoff contender come November? Florida State having to bring back plenty of talent and build on last year, but a new quarterback there. I think, both sides, there's some dark horses here, but also some teams you look at in this AP poll out today and that we might look back on in November and see, they're in a far different place.
Eli, with the preseason top 25, what quickly followed was a look at here's how the playoff would look if this is how it would finish. And I was just curious of where you stand on the expanded playoff. I mean, it's impossible to not embrace it now that it's here, but were you somebody that was for or against the idea of a 12-team playoff?
I'm all for it. I mean, I think, yes, like that probably the chief argument against, right, is maybe cheapening certain games. You no longer have the do or die nature of, you lose 2 games before November and your championship aspirations are done for. But flip that around, now way more teams are going to have, things to play for in November. Again, talking about a school like Missouri, a school like Utah, I think now that the door is open for really any program to dream. And that's what it's all about, right? So I think the fact that you're going to have more teams playing more meaningful games in October, November, teams getting to host on-campus games in the postseason, I think it's going to be a blast. So I'm, on the whole, all for it. And I think whatever is perhaps lost by making this pool a bit bigger is going to be made up for, and just how fun this thing's going to be once we get to it.
You wrote about Marcus Freeman and the impact he's had on Notre Dame, that even though they've been good, at times there was some disappointment when it comes to recruiting and who they were getting. How much of an impact has he made, in your opinion?
Well, I think, for one, with Marcus Freeman in general, he's changed what they're doing there. It's worth pointing out at the start of this. We're not talking about a small directional school somewhere. We're talking about Notre Dame, one of the biggest brands and powers in college football. But the fact is, and we've seen this when they've got to the biggest stages, you think back to national title games or playoff games, they're a step behind, the SEC elite, the biggest programs in the country. And he's taken steps, and it's shown in the recruiting, but really it's shown in what they're doing behind the scenes to revolutionize what they're doing in recruiting. And I think, as we talk about a 12-team playoff, Notre Dame has a good path to get there. No longer are they going to be handcuffed by not having a conference title game. They have pathways to be there. And if they're recruiting better and they're getting to that postseason format more often, surely, you know, they're going to be better positioned to at least compete when they get into those games with the very best programs across the country. And so that was kind of the thrust of the story, is that, you know, they've made really big changes. They've really committed to recruiting probably in ways they hadn't in years past. And all of that is in the backdrop of the fact that, you know, Notre Dame, you know, has academic limitations. There's things about Notre Dame that make it different than recruiting than just about any other school in the country. And Marcus Freeman has really embraced that and found ways to evolve what they're doing.
You know, I was kind of surprised. I know, like, the limitations, yes, but the passion from the fan base is nearly global when it comes to college football and Notre Dame. And I was kind of surprised to find out that they had, you know, maybe kind of gone a more traditional route when it came to NIL and all those other things right at first as well. How much of those things changed in the last year or so?
Yeah, well, for one, you know, as far as Marcus Freeman, just think about the profile. I mean, he's young, he's dynamic, he connects with people. So he found a way to sort of bring a young energy to a program that, you know, just historically has this, it's probably one of the most traditional and, let's say, lower seed conservative, you know, football programs in the country. It's Notre Dame football, it's Rudy, it's all that. And so he's brought a different energy to it. And, you know, as far as recruiting goes historically, and this still hasn't changed a whole lot, you've got to go get kids who can play at Notre Dame. And that sounds, you know, silly in a sense, and they still recruit so well. But the pool of elite college football players, at least as they feel at Notre Dame, who are, you know, in the mold to play at Notre Dame, to go to class every day, to be a part of the entire thing that makes Notre Dame, which, again, on that campus, they feel is different than just about anywhere in the country, is different. They don't feel like they can go for you know, the same kids that Alabama and Georgia and even Ohio State and Michigan go for and have the same success. So their pool is more limited. It's why they focus on the kids they feel like that are elite but also fit. But as Marcus Freeman has shown in the last couple of years, he's maybe been a bit more willing to go outside of those traditional private Catholic school footprints and recruit from other places. And I think that's another place where he's pushing the limits a bit. And I think in the next few years, at least in his vision, they're going to be, you know, pushing on some of those barriers they've hit in the past.
What sense of excitement do you get from the Irish about Riley Leonard and what he can possibly do this year?
I've heard really good things so far. I think they're excited about him, and we know, you know, it all starts at quarterback just about everywhere, but that's a place where Sam Hartman burned bright early last year, but maybe didn't quite have it. I think there's excitement about him, excitement around the talent around him. But I can say in like the early weeks of camp, which is when you just start hearing things trickling out about who looks good, often about who doesn't look good. You know, heard stuff out of Iowa yesterday with that scrimmage. Everyone glommed down to that, but really positive things about Riley Leonard. And I think they feel good about a relatively light schedule this year, just the way things are breaking and the fact that this 12-team playoff really does open things up for them.
So, Eli, you know, you're now at ESPN. You also are recovering quite a bit of the recruiting. I saw where today Georgia Tech received a commitment from a 5-star offensive lineman, I believe, and maybe an offensive or defensive lineman in Petty. And then also Oregon just picked up a massive commitment from Cody Green, an offensive tackle. But Georgia Tech and Brent Key, how much of a wow was that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this was trending that way with Josh Petty, so it wasn't a big surprise today. But gosh, consider, you know, the idea of Georgia Tech going out and beating Ohio State and Florida State and Tennessee for some of the biggest guys in the country, right? That's not a story you see every day. And I think some of that is certainly a testament to Brent Key. It helps that Josh Petty is from, you know, 20 miles away in Georgia from Georgia Tech. But certainly this is probably an insight into the way that NIL and what some of these programs in some, you know, talent-rich areas, but also, you know, some area. Georgia Tech is well placed. Everyone's been saying this since NIL rolled around. They'd be well placed if we get it organized to make some strides through NIL. And I think this is a good example of that. And you see the class that Brent Key has going there is probably on pace right now. If they hold on to these guys and maybe add a bit more, it's going to be a historic class for the Yellow Jackets. And this is clearly the cornerstone piece of that with what they did today.
Thanks for the time, Eli. Appreciate it. We have games. We have the poll now, coaches poll, USA Today, and now the AP poll. We have games coming up around the corner. We've had all this realignment. There's still speculation. How much will it be for you, even though you do a lot of recruiting coverage, that's constant, just to have meat on the bone and actual evidence of stats and games?
Oh, it's the best. I mean, you're right. My role is different now. Previously, when I was covering Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, I'd be gearing up for, 14 games over the next few months and a full season with the team. But now I'll be covering recruiting. I'll still be doing plenty of general college football coverage too. And my proximity, I'm in Oklahoma City, so the Stillwater and the Norman are going to be well used. And it just gets more fun for all of us once games are going. And I do think in this era where commitments are less firm than ever and NIL is more present than ever, the recruiting world is going to stay very active this fall. So I think there will be plenty of good stuff to follow.
Eli, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again. Eli Lederman with us, as he was talking about. He was covering Oklahoma and Oklahoma State for a while, but now with ESPN, a little bit of both, the games, the college football coverage, but also quite a bit when it comes to recruiting too, with a couple of offensive linemen. I said 5-star, 4-star Petty committed to Georgia Tech. That's a pretty nice get for Brent Keep.